Hello. Hello. My name is Alexis Vanderman. I graduated from Lewis and Clark Law School with a certificate in environmental and natural resources law last week. I'm honored to be here, and I'm very pleased to introduce our first speaker. Aaron Wolf is a professor of geography at Oregon State University in the USA, where he directs the program in water conflict management and transformation. So please join me in welcoming Professor Wolf.
Thank you, Alexis. It's an honor to be here, and I want to thank our hosts. And you kind of realize where you're getting in the schedule. You're now at the level where we don't wear neckties, right? All morning we're at a certain level. The other thing I want to mention before we get too far, Alexis got offered a job just last night, so can we give another round of applause? So there is, for those students who are here, there is life after graduation for some. Because I'm first, what I thought I'd do is give some general background to water issues, global water issues, international water issues, and then focus in and hopefully, if I end up with the time, on a little bit of work that I've been doing around the world now on sabbatical, but also some of this work has been here in India. To start generally, and these are some of the numbers in your pamphlet, this crisis that we're dealing with is one of the biggest out there. It's 2.5 billion people lack access to sanitation, 1 billion people lack access to safe drinking water. 250 million people get sick every year. That's a little less than the entire population of the United States. 2.5 to 5 million people die every year. So if you think of orders of magnitude of crises, this is as big as anything. This is as big as HIV/AIDS, this is as big as malaria, and it's bigger than anything else. It's bigger than all the wars of any given year put together. It's bigger than earthquakes, tsunamis, floods, droughts, anything else you can imagine. This is bigger. The heartbreaking part is our response to this. It isn't even a sector of any of the other threats. In the United States, we give less than 1% of our GDP to foreign assistance, and that's considered high in the developing world. So I want us to keep that in the back of our mind as we move forward. But the point of this meeting is more the political ramifications of this crisis. How does this lead to conflict and cooperation? The Vice Chancellor laid out our two paths. We hear about conflict, we hear about the wars of the 21st century, and I'll talk a bit about that. The problem with water, of course, everybody needs it, as most of the speakers this morning said. We need it for all levels of our existence. Unlike tungsten or gold or timber or fish, we need it for everything we do. All aspects of our society, our culture, our heritage, everything has a water component. And so if we think about it, the ecosystem needs water. Transportation, I don't know if that's the most common form of transportation. The dams, hydropower, this is big in the US as it is here in India. Agriculture, irrigation takes up 2/3 of the world's water. Spiritual dimension, water, all the religions of the world tap into water for spiritual cleansing. And of course, drinking water, which is hugely critical, but a very small portion, only about 5%. The problem is, any two of these are potentially in conflict with each other. Water management is conflict management. That's what we do. If there's enough for everybody, we wouldn't be sitting here in this room. Water management is conflict management. We treat it as a scarce resource. The other thing that's frustrating about water is it moves. Think of other resources. They have the courtesy to stay in one place. Timber stays, gold stays. Water moves through space and time. How much water will there be here in the Ganges next? We don't know. And yet we have to treat it like any other resource. We have to allocate it, manage it, think about who gets how much, assuming that we know something that we don't, which is how much is going to be there. And then nature gives us a unit. Nature gives us a unit. If you look here from the ridge to the stream, if we look down on this, in American English this is called a watershed, in British English this is a catchment. Within this unit, this is the unit unit that nature gives us to manage water. Everything's connected to everything else. Surface water, groundwater, quality, quantity. This is the unit within which forces are brought together. We're all connected within this. And of course, politically, what do we do with this? Absolutely ignore it. Draw nice straight lines right through the middle of it. Or worse, sometimes we use the river itself as a boundary. And what do rivers do over time? They move. Sometimes to our advantage, those of us from Oregon, I don't know if you know the boundary between us and Washington, Oregonians, what's the boundary? Which part of the river? The Columbia? Channel, the deepest part. Bless your heart. Geography lesson for the day. The deepest part of the river is called the Towway. And that's what the boundary is, specifically because if you think about it, rivers originally were for navigation. And you didn't want to navigate into either territory, into one country or the other, because then they would have jurisdiction. So all over the world, the boundary is the deepest part of the channel, specifically so ships wouldn't have to go into one territory or the other. Now the nice thing about the Columbia is gently over geologic time, it's drifting north. So every couple of thousand years, we get about this much of Washington. So if you wait around long enough, we get Seattle. So stick around. All right. This now creates our overarching dilemma. The water people see the world on the left. Water people see the things that bring us together, the watersheds, the forces that unite us. The rest of the world works through the things that divide us, the state boundaries, the national boundaries, the economic boundaries, the things that separate us out. Which one of these is correct? Both of them. Right? There is no right here. The point is, if you're looking at water, of course you can see the things that unite us, but the boundaries are there for very specific, legitimate reasons. They're there to separate economies, sovereignties, ethnicities, the things that the most boundaries that are set up for very specific reasons, and we can't pretend that they don't exist. So our job in transboundary waters is to balance these two views, is to manage the water as if the world looked the way on the right, while recognizing and incorporating and thinking explicitly about how to incorporate the forces represented on the left. Now, when I first started getting involved in this, as the Vice Chancellor said, the dominant paradigm was water wars. That's in the early 90s. That's what you heard. Wars of the 21st century will be about water. Some very famous people said it. I was trained as a scientist. I was coming out with a degree in hydrogeology, and I was interested as a scientist. I was thinking, man, that's a pretty big proclamation. What do we know? I mean, on what basis do we say something as big as the wars of the 21st century will be about water? Well, what we heard a lot in the literature at the time was about 6 case studies. 2 of them were here, the Indus and the Ganges. We're actually in the Ganges basin here. In Delhi. So the Ganges shared with Bangladesh primarily, the Indus with Pakistan. The Tigris Euphrates we heard about, where armies had actually been mobilized in 1979. The Ural Basin, which we'll hear a bit more in a couple of minutes, where you have water conflict moving in one direction, natural gas conflict moving in the other direction, and the sea itself disappearing year by year. And the 2 that were kind of the headline grabbers in the early 90s were these 2. It was the Nile. 10 countries share the Nile. And people were talking about war here on the Nile between India is not on the Nile yet. Egypt, who'd been using the water since time immemorial, and Ethiopia, which contributes 75% of the flow. And of course the Jordan Basin, shared by Arabs and Israelis, and everywhere there's a border conflict, there's a water conflict underlying it. So people were saying, look, here's these 6 case studies, they've all run out of water, they all hate each other, clearly the wars of the next century will be about water. And that's really interesting. I just get a show of hands. How many people believe this? How many people are persuaded by that argument? Yeah, it's persuasive. We need water. We're running out of it. These people hate each other, of course. Now, as a scientist, you got to ask, what's the evidence? What are the drivers? What are the assumptions? Right? So I asked, what do we know? 6 international basins, people are telling us. What do we know about them? And how many are there? We didn't know. In 1992, famous quote, Kofi Annan, fierce competition for fresh water may well become a source of conflict and wars in the future. So that's the jumping off point in the early 90s. This map didn't exist in 1992 when people were talking about basins. We didn't know how many international basins there were. It took 2.5 years to make this map, just to count that there are 276 international basins in the world. Not 6, 276 international basins. It's half the land surface of the earth, 40% of the world's population, 80% of freshwater flow originates in basins that are shared by 2 or more countries. So N, if you will, is big. It's bigger than 6, 276. And we hear about 6. What's happening in the other 270? We don't know. The other thing, if there's a spectrum from conflict to cooperation, what we've been hearing about is on the conflict side. India and Pakistan, faced off in these 2 periods. Israel and Jordan had conflict over this and this. You heard about the conflict side, but is it possible in the other 270 basins something else is going on we didn't know? Is it possible that there's conflict? Is it possible that nothing's happening? Is it possible maybe even that there's some cooperation on these international basins? So what we started to do is just count stuff. I'm a scientist, that's what we do. We collect data. We start to collect. What are the world's experience in shared waters around the world? And we started to collect. We have reference to 3,600 treaties. The full text, this is actually an old slide. We have 500, full text of 500 water treaties, all the US compacts. And we've coded, and I'll show you in a second, negotiating notes, annotated bibliography for the students who are here. It's all online. You can click on a base and up comes the annotated bibliography, all the treaties that are related to it. But the one thing that I wanted to get at was, besides those 6 basins, what else has happened? So we set out, course of 3 years, to count every time 2 countries did anything over water, what did they do? And to code it along that spectrum from conflict to cooperation. So we did. We went back, took a long time, reading news files, text, whatever information we could find, 1,830-something events over 60 years, and we coded them all along that spectrum, and suddenly the story starts to look a little bit nuanced. So here's what we found in 60 years. The intense cooperation is on your right, the intense conflict is on the left. What you notice right off is 2/3 of the time we do anything over water, it's cooperating. 2/3 of the time we do anything over water, it's cooperating. And it's the same people that they said, look at the conflict. It's India and Pakistan, it's Israelis and Arabs, it's Azeris and Armenians. All over the world, what seems to happen is stress brings people to the point of conflict, but then that point generates resources, generates interest, generates creativity, and that then leads to agreement and cooperation, and oftentimes treaties, even between people who hate each other, even as they conflict on other issues. On the conflict side, you'll notice that -1 and -2, most conflict is verbal conflict. And it's generated by two groups of people. It's either a journalist writing about it or a politician speaking about it. That's who's generating the water conflict in the world today, journalists and politicians. I'll sit there for an hour with a journalist explaining the nuance and why human creativity doesn't necessarily lead to conflict. And look at all this historic example, and the headline the next day is inevitably, what? Water wars on the horizon. Absolutely, I get it. Now the politician is something else. The politician, when they say water wars, the first question you have to ask, who are they speaking to? Are they speaking to the enemy? No. When North Korea is threatening the United States with nuclear war, are they even speaking to the United States? Are we scared? Who are they speaking to? They're speaking to their own constituents. And what do they mean by we're going to go to war? They mean vote for me in November. And so if we recognize that there's a lot of talk, but the actual action, this -5 and -6, 38 times in the last 60 years has anybody shot at each other over, or mobilized armies over international waters, specifically over the water. 38 times, 27 of these were between Israelis and Arabs, which is interesting because the last shot fired on the Jordan was in 1970. 1970. So here's the worst case scenario. People hate each other about as viscerally as any groups of people hate each other, ran out of water. in 1968. Demand hit supply in 1968. Influx of immigrants, influx of refugees, economies growing, populations growing. All these things are happening, and there's still quite a lot of political tension. I don't know if you know, there's some tension between Israelis and Arabs. But their water issues are resolved in the absence of violence. That's interesting. And if we look at war, -7, none. None. There's one water war in history, and it was 4,500 years ago between the city-states of Lagash and Ilma. So this gives us a little different story, a little more nuanced story. It's not to say that the news is all good. If you look, I don't have a pointer, so I'll just do these quickly, and you can go back and look on your own. Out of the basins, only about 40% of bilateral, or 30% of bilateral basins and 40% of multilateral basins have any kind of agreement on them. So even though there are a lot of agreements, there's a lot also that aren't, a lot of basins without agreements. And if we break down and code each of these agreements as we have, you'll find that a lot of these agreements are agreements in name only. Only a quarter of them have allocation mechanisms, a third of them have joint management institutions, 20% include the environment, and only 30% have conflict resolution mechanisms. So even though there's a vast amount of treaties, it doesn't mean that they're all good treaties, that they're all robust treaties, that they're all resilient treaties. So there's definitely work to be done. And in fact, this leads us to my second point. Everything's okay is the same myth as water wars on the horizon. And I think everything's not okay for 3 reasons. One, how much time it takes. The Indus Agreement is a very resilient agreement. It took 10 years to negotiate. The Ganges Agreement took 30 years to negotiate. The Jordan, they're still negotiating 40 years in. Now what happens when it takes that kind of time? Remember, countries develop unilaterally, and the crisis brings them to a point where they will enter into some kind of an agreement. But from the crisis point, from that flash point, to the process of conflict resolution, we're talking about 10 or 20 or 30 years. Now think back to all the people that suffer and die because of mismanaged water. During those 10 or 20 or 30 years, if you're not managing the water cooperatively, you're not managing it efficiently. So people continue to suffer, continue to die, ecosystems continue to get degraded until there finally comes about a robust agreement that ideally takes into account human and natural needs as well. But that's a long, long process. And the other point, and I think in India you know it better than most places, we're not just talking about nations. If you go drop-in scale, Narmada River, for example, there is violent conflict, and it's been going on for years. As you drop in scale, the likelihood of violence actually does go up. And you do find violence, interstate violence, tribal violence, ethnic violence, all over the world around water resources, just not at the international level. And the last reason everything's not okay is, again, a more subtle point about the relationship between security and water. People suffer. What happens, these are heavily irrigated areas. The blue are irrigated areas. And the red countries are countries that irrigation water is being degraded either through poor quality or poor quantity. And if you see here, it's quite a lot of the region here in Southeast Asia and the Middle East. What happens when people start to run out of water? For example, in the North China Plain, they have 3 choices. They adapt, they suffer and die, or they move. And primarily they move. And they move where? They move to the cities that don't have infrastructure to absorb them. They move primarily single angry men moving into cities. This is destabilizing. And I think if we're looking for real security issues of water, this is one. What it means is we're not talking about major issues of war and peace. We're talking about poverty alleviation being a security strategy. And that's really important to know. Simply bringing people out of poverty creates more political stability. And if you doubt, think of the case of Syria. I don't know if you all know, but the area where the revolution started, Hama, is just now in a 3-year drought. It's been in a drought for the last 3 years. People, single, angry men, moving precisely into those cities, which ends up sparking conflict. None of this is what I wanted to talk about. This is setting. This is context. A couple of you at dinner had asked me what I'm doing here. I mean, here, obviously, because I was kindly invited to be here. I really wanted to be here. But I'm on sabbatical, kind of on a very different track entirely. Part of my work, half of my work is what you just saw. Big data sets, big global trends, indicators of conflict and cooperation. But the other half of my job is in the room. I act as a facilitator, a mediator. And part of what's interesting in that is that I, like many of you, how many people have taken a course in conflict resolution or negotiations? Wow. Okay, all lawyers should do this. I'm just going to throw that out there. The trick is, at the international level, there really is no international law that you can hang an agreement on. And so these things are hashed out by basically a room full of angry people, generally trained as engineers or economists or hydrologists. And that's where I spend the other half of my room, is working within that setting. And I, like most of us, were trained in Western models of conflict resolution, which is in the head, which is rational. If you only saw that it was in your interest to agree, you would agree. Well, the problem is, you ask, how do you know it was in your interest to agree? Well, they agreed. That's called in academia a tautology. That's circular logic, right? If you can only prove something is going to happen because it happened, that really doesn't prove anything. And so the other question is, well, what models do we really have elsewhere around the world for thinking about sources of conflict and sources of anger? And so I start here and talk about Kabbalah. Believe me, I'm not going to try and do Kabbalah in 30 seconds. It's not doable. But the idea is, if you think about our approaches to things like conflict, there's a rational approach and there's something called a transcendent approach, thinking about the energy in the room. And they come together sitting in a place called compassion. What do I mean by this? If you think about how our bodies are designed, you have left brain, which is rational, linear, and you have the right brain, which is expansive, transcendent, and then you have your heart, which kind of balances the both, right? The interesting thing, if you think about kind of science and spirituality, we, the North and West, consciously, 200 years ago, decided to separate those realms. We, in the Enlightenment, decided that our public discourse was going to be totally rational. If you could quantify it and measure it, you could talk about it. And if you couldn't, you could do it, but you had to do it at home at night with your Friday, Saturday, or Sunday community. And that's what happened only in the West. The rest of the world didn't do that. The rest of the world, this is still all one unit. So what happens when we think about things like conflict resolution? We come from the West, we'll measure the conflict, we'll quantify, we'll model it, we'll figure out the rational solution. And we don't have trainings for things like, on the other side, things like transcendent moments. We don't have understanding of what face or honor or community, and we certainly don't use the word spirituality in any academic setting, absolutely, ever, for good reason. And usually I come from a minority faith, and usually when somebody says spirituality, they're going to try and persuade me of something. I don't want to be persuaded. But the point is, if we're going to go out and do the work, we have to remember that this is solely a Western construct to only talk about the rational during the day. And so when I go and start to mediate on the Mekong River Commission, and people are talking to me about things like faith and honor and community and spirit, and I don't have in my checklist that I brought from USAID any place to put this, I hate to say it, but this is a form of imperialism. I'm imposing post-Enlightenment thinking on a different culture. Unconsciously. We've been walking around with one eye closed for 200 years. We don't even know we're doing it, and we're trying to see perspective. So here, once you do go out into the world and start to think like this, is this model universal? I learned this in Kabbalah, right? Well, as you start to look around, it's actually really beautiful. It's the balance of justice, mercy, and then they come together in a place called compassion. What's compassion? It's the same root as womb, which means that a mother gives all of her loving kindness, all of her loving kindness to her unborn baby, only as long as she's healthy herself. Right? So this is a great model for conflict resolution. It's not giving in to the other people. It's not solely being rational, one side's right or one side's wrong. It's thinking about the whole. It's being rooted in my own needs while empathizing and trying to reach a place that the other person's needs are met well. I was working with a Buddhist monk who does facilitation, and I was talking to him about this balance. I said, what I know of Buddhism is just the expansive, the metta. He said, he drew this on a piece of paper. He said, well, have you ever seen this symbol? It's Taoist, but we use it too, kind of the same thing, the balance between self and other, individual and community, spirit and rationality. Here, the third eye, I just before I came here, it was 10 days in an ashram. Shiva's third eye is a third eye of wisdom. You have to look at this same model but upside down. The left eye is the eye of justice. The right eye is the right of love, and the third eye is the eye of wisdom. The three coming together. So this idea that they all work together is absolutely universal, except North America and Europe. We really have to know that. We have to understand it. In the Middle East, I worked there for a long time, where this is lived. When there's a conflict, there's something called a sulha. There's a ceremony, a formal ceremony of forgiveness, where the perpetrator comes to the family that they've wronged and asks for forgiveness. I took power from you. I come now under white flag with the muhtar of the village, and I'm coming and I'm asking. I give the power back to you to decide whether to accept me back into the community. Because the crime is not just between me and you, but I tore the fabric of our community, and it's up to us together to heal it, the value of the community. Again, the balancing of rights and honor, and I've seen this in Bedouin land courts, where they say, I've heard a Bedouin land court judge say, you know what, you're right, but how do we walk out of here where he can also walk out with his head held high? How can we retain his honor and your rights? What a great question. Do we ask that in a court of law? I don't know. I'm not a lawyer, and I'm not going to comment on the law, except the idea in a lot of the world that you can walk into a building and one side be declared totally right and the other side be declared totally wrong and lose everything is repugnant. We have to know that. I love this idea. Tardin is an Arabic word, resolution of a conflict that involves no humiliation. What a great concept. What a great concept, right? Remember, these are the people that we went to Iraq to teach democracy to, right? This is something that I think, these are the values that I think as we do this work, and the reason it's important is this map. This is a map that shows, I'm not all woo-woo and groovy. I've still do science, and the science that I do, we counted up water aid that goes from the north out into the rest of the world. And this is the flow of water-related aid. And it's coming primarily, again, from Northern Europe and from North America. And it goes out into the rest of the world. And again, when it goes out with Western metrics of success. These are your priorities. These are the metrics. These are the values that you need to incorporate. And it doesn't include any of these things. It doesn't include honor. It doesn't include faith. It doesn't include community. It doesn't include any component into spirituality as well. And as we unwittingly, I'm not saying this is something that we do out of malice, but unwittingly, as we send this money and we send this aid and we attach these conditions, it is, again, and I want to repeat it, it is a form of intellectual imperialism. And I don't want to do anything except make us aware of it. We, those of us who are from the West, need to be cognizant that there are a lot of different ways of looking at the world. And this kind of grander, balanced way is actually much more common in the world than ours. And just to recognize that, I like this quote from Kofi Annan. It was funny because I was working within UN agencies documenting all the history of cooperation between between countries. And finally, Kofi Annan, who had just like the year before predicted water wars, he's suddenly faced with 5 volumes of documentation of cooperation at all different levels. And so, bless his heart, he did make a speech that year where he said this, and I think this is a better note to end on. The water problems of our world need not only be a cause of tension, they can be a catalyst for cooperation. If we work together, a secure and sustainable water future can be ours. Thank you.